Thank you. Okay, wow, bright lights, big screens, beautiful people. Thank you so much for having me today. And you will see me glancing at my phone and some notes now and then. I'm terrible at timekeeping, and it's Saturday, so I'm allowed to use notes. But thank you for inviting me today. Oh, I need a clicker. Oh, there it is. I knew there was something else that I needed. There we go. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to jump forward. Okie doke. So psychosocial disability, I just want to talk about what is this term. I think it's a horrible sounding word and it conjures up a lot of thoughts that are probably quite negative and maybe fill you with fear when we use that word psychosocial. So what is psychosocial? It's a relatively new label that sits in the mental health space. And it was actually recently introduced by the NDIS because the NDIS needed a box to be able to assess eligibility for an NDIS plan. So with the NDIS, the narrowness of eligibility means that if you have a mental health unwellness, but you're functioning quite well, you are not likely to qualify for the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. But if you are feeling unwell and you're not able to function in day-to-day activities, then you may well find yourself with the label psychosocial. So understanding what that means is fundamentally you can live with a mental health diagnosis, schizophrenia, bipolar, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress. They're just a few examples. But be functioning in a manner where you are happy with life, you are happy with how you function, you feel your life has purpose and quality. However, mental illness or mental health becomes an illness and will pick up that frame of psychosocial or that label when somebody is feeling that their life isn't as should be. I'm not able to function well. I'm in fear of. I'm not managing work well. I'm not able to get out of bed every day with purpose and enthusiasm. I mean, there's a multitude of things that could be going through somebody's mind. But at the end of the day, mental health becomes a disability, which then carries this umbrella term of psychosocial disability, when somebody is not well, not able to function to the full capacity that they would like to be. So I've already mentioned a few of the different mental health diagnoses that may give rise to psychosocial disability. And I do want to point out that borderline personality is a mental health illness that often goes hand in hand with more unwellness at times than wellness. For people with borderline personality, you'll find their life may be a little bit sporadic. Inability to just flow through each day with ease, struggling with relationships, struggling with friendships, struggling with your day-to-day activities like paying rent, turning up at work, doing study, whatever the case may be, and also struggling with self-image. So you will find or come across quite a few people who carry the label psychosocial disability, whose underlying mental health diagnosis is borderline personality. However, a psychosocial disability can occur for anyone with a mental health unwellness or a mental health illness. And I just want to point out the prevalence of psychosocial disability or mental health unwellness. In disability land, as I call it, we live a life where we experience a lot of barriers, a lot of challenges, and unfortunately a lot of abuses. I do encourage you to jump online and have a look at the Royal Commission findings, the Disability Royal Commission into violence, abuse, exploitation. You don't have to read every summary from front to back, but just have a look at the Royal Commission reports because it will give you really good insight into the difficulties that a lot of people with disability face on a regular day-to-day basis. So what we find is for at least 47% of people living with a primary disability, say maybe a wheelchair user, will develop a mental illness and are at 3 times the more risk of developing psychosocial disability or actually experience a lot of unwellness. And those reports by the Royal Commission will give you some really good insight into why it is so, or why that's occurring. The other thing I would like to point out too is mental health unwellness and psychosocial disability among our First Nation population. And, you know, I can't go into detail, but given colonisation and the fact that we still live in a community or a society where a lot of people in minority groups, First Nation, feel that they fringed well. They're not fitting into society. And then that can manifest in a lot of different mental health unwellness, and of course then carry that label of psychosocial disability. I've already mentioned a few of the things that having psychosocial disability might result in, but we're looking at if you're working with somebody who struggles with concentration at times, on and off, or somebody who's been functioning quite well and then all of a sudden you see quite a change in their concentration or changes in that confidence to go out and mix and mingle. You might find people don't want to get out of bed. They stop doing a lot of activities that bring them joy, things that they would normally enjoy doing on a day-to-day basis. Somebody may not be doing well with study and their study is up and down, or they're writing really great assessments and passing all their study, and then all of a sudden that drops off, or what they're writing doesn't even look like it has come from that same person when they're writing assessments. Sometimes people with psychosocial disability will struggle with self and self-value, especially when a person is feeling unwell. So you might find that being able to accept constructive criticism or have what I call the hard conversations is a bit more difficult, or triggers a person to become more emotional than what you would normally find that they're like on good days or when they're well. A really big issue though for people with psychosocial disability is that community mixing and that functioning on a day-to-day basis in such a way that a person feels they are living quality. So it's not about our measure, it's about their measure, what they feel is actually quality for their life. I do want to point out too that not everyone with a mental health condition will have psychosocial disability. Those that do will very much stand out over time once you get to know a person. And also understand that mental illness and psychosocial disability can fluctuate. No two people are the same. No two situations are the same. This is a really important point, actually. We live in a society where we do not understand mental health well, and we judge quite harshly. And we also tend to look at people with non-visible disabilities, like mental illness, from a perspective of, well, you look well. You don't look like you would have anything wrong with you. Maybe you've got nothing wrong with you and you're just looking to make gains. Maybe you're just trying to get on the NDIS and you're absolutely fine, whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, we need to understand that 90% of people living with disability in this country live with non-visible disability. And somewhere around the 1.1 million mark are people with mental illness or mental health conditions. And among those people, you will have people experiencing psychosocial disability or unwellness. Oh, sorry, that just threw me because my slide was different yesterday and I thought, what the heck was that? I just want to play you this great little video, just introduces you to some people talking about their experience of psychosocial disability and what that means for them.
Before I heard about psychosocial disability, I just thought I was extremely bad at life. I thought I didn't get it, and I thought I was just hopeless because I knew what I wanted to do, but I couldn't do it. And I've only really heard the term since the NDIS, and I guess the way I look at it is that people with psychosocial disability find it hard to function in society.
The way I describe it, and there's no one perfect way, I'd say it's about problems of everyday living. You know, it's about having a lot of trouble doing the things that we all take for granted in our everyday lives, like managing a house, getting and keeping a job, having a healthy social support network of friends and family around you. It's about struggling with those things, severely struggling with those things.
I've Googled it and even then it sounds so clinical, it really does, considering that you actually live it.
Psychosocial disability, a lot of people that I know have a problem identifying that they've got a disability because they think it's a bad thing. But it's not really that bad at all. If you've got social phobia, your functional impairment could be that you're so afraid to go outside of the house without any support that you almost turn into a hermit. So that is a psychosocial disability because of you having that mental illness.
I guess you just kind of struggle through life, and because it's invisible, it's not really recognised. So I think more people have psychosocial disability than we realise, including people that don't realise they have it. Yeah.
So it's a really interesting topic, these things, psychosocial disability and mental health or mental illness alone. And we certainly don't have the time to unpack exactly what does this look like and how will I know if somebody is unwell or just having a bad day and they're not really unwell. It's such a difficult grey area for us to navigate. And the best advice I can give you is to search out information. Ask questions, gently, of course. But if somebody discloses to you that they live with psychosocial disability or that they have a mental health condition, sit down, have a cup of tea, ask them to teach you, to help you learn the best ways that you can support them and navigate this mental health, psychosocial disability space. Because I think the most difficult thing is we often come to lectures like this looking for answers of how to identify different disability types, how to identify when somebody's just having a difficult day, opposed to being quite unwell. And it's then actually psychosocial disability, not just a difficult day. And at the end of the day, it's about having the conversations and asking those living in the psychosocial disability space to teach you, to guide you. the importance of understanding is I can't find the right words to express how important it is for you to be able to understand how best to meet each individual person's needs. But you can only do that by getting to know each individual person. So, you know, I would love, while we continue through today, is that you just stop and think and ask yourself, what is the importance of understanding this concept, psychosocial disability? Why do I need to know about mental health and mental health conditions? And how best can I learn? Why is it important as a support worker? And go and search out answers and ponder that question, not just as we move through these slides today, but when the conference is over and you're moving forward in life and supporting people in their disability needs. So I just want to talk about and unpack a little bit some of the barriers that people with psychosocial disability will experience. And you heard people mention some in that video. What we find is, sorry, I'm getting very confused with the slides here. What we find is there's 4 particular areas that people will face barrier. People living with mental health conditions, psychosocial disability. When we look at societal and cultural barriers, we're looking at things, and institutional barriers, we're looking at things such as social stigma. I just mentioned a few moments ago how poorly understood mental health is and how in fear we are often when we hear that somebody has a mental illness. I always say the mental health arena is so poorly understood that it's almost like the last frontier in Australia. So misunderstood and so much stigma, and also a condition that we shy away from talking about, or we shy away from engaging with people who do share that they have a mental health condition or a psychosocial disability. So stigma is very prevalent. There's a lot of myths, there's a lot of untruths that float around about people with psychosocial disability. So I do encourage you to search out credible and correct information and have the conversations with people living with the condition. A lot of people will have challenges linking with and staying with services, working with different services. A lot of people with psychosocial disability may have trust issues for good reason and choose to not engage with treatment. A lot of people may have had terrible experiences when they have tried to engage with treatment because of the medical model of disability, which I'd also encourage you to look into and unpack. A lot of people will feel dehumanised, and discrimination in that disability space, in so much as the mental health space, is just so prevalent across society. We're very intolerant of what we don't understand, and we very much fear what we don't understand. When we look at interpersonal and individual barriers, it's very much about what you've learnt throughout your life, in so much as if I have a mental health diagnosis or if I'm experiencing psychosocial disability, that's shameful, that's my secret, I can't let people know. That's a massive issue, and that is something where you may be working with somebody with disability who has this secondary mental health condition, psychosocial disability, and you may never know that about a person until they feel comfortable enough to have the conversations with you because of that shame, that fear, that if I share with somebody that I'm unwell, what is their reaction going to be like? Other issues, people will be reluctant to ask for help, maybe because they've asked for help before and not had good experiences, whether that's been with professionals, with families, with friends. Fewer opportunities in employment, fewer opportunities in socialising because of the barriers that may well be self-imposed, but may actually be imposed by society as well. Society is not very tolerant of disability, and society is very intolerant of disability that they can't actually see. But then if we're looking at a person with unique behaviours, unusual behaviours, eccentric behaviours, we're more likely to shy away than lean into our own discomfort and choose to get to know a person and why it is so. Other interpersonal, individual barriers, a lot of people with mental illness will have experienced a lifetime of bullying, a lifetime of physical violence, harassment. A lot of people with mental health illness are quite visible socially. So we see unusual behaviour that feeds into that stigmatising of the mental health condition. And we also find that a lot of people with mental health unwellness, a lot of people with psychosocial disability, believe a lot of the myths, and that you will not have a good life. Your life will never amount to anything. So self-doubt can be quite prevalent among people living with psychosocial disability. Working with people with psychosocial disability, I think this is really interesting because there's no one size fits all. You know, I always say you meet a person with bipolar disorder, you've met one person with bipolar disorder. You meet a wheelchair user, you've met one person who uses a wheelchair. And I think the really interesting thing is understanding how best to work with people with any type of disability, but of course in this case psychosocial, where there's so much grey and so little understanding. And it can find us pulling away from engaging with people because we're so in fear of getting it wrong or making a mistake. It is actually a good opportunity for you to help a person grow in their self-belief by handing over the power. So if you don't understand how best to work with somebody who experiences psychosocial disability, it's not just up to you to go and work out how and find out how. Ask a person, what are your requirements? How can I best support you? As Melissa was saying, step into their world. What is their reality? Doesn't matter if it's not your reality. The moment you start to have those respectful engagements with people where you're fundamentally saying, guide me, teach me, help me, you're showing vulnerability. You're handing the power over. And in a world where people with disability do not experience a lot of personal power or empowerment, you've just by stealth stepped onto a pathway where you're actually communicating, I respect you, I want to know about you, I want to do the best work I possibly can with you. Please help me, please teach me. And you will find that type of approach will achieve a heck of a lot more in your day-to-day supports for people, individuals with psychosocial disability, than any textbooks ever will. But I still encourage you to seek out credible current information as well. Sorry, I will go back one there. I also should point out the fact that when we are looking at ensuring that we take a recovery-oriented approach, person-led approach. I mean, person-led, it says it all. Show me, teach me, help me. Led by that person with psychosocial disability. Look at a person from the perspective of, I wonder what their strengths are. I wonder what their skills are. I wonder what attributes this person has. Always assume capacity. See the entire human being, not just this label. You know, I sit here in front of you in a wheelchair, and I often say to people, when you look at me, what do you see? Do you only see disability? Or do you see a mother, a teacher, a pet owner, a consumer, a neighbour, a colleague? That's very, very important when working with people with psychosocial disability. It is about seeing the person, not addressing a disability. That's not your job. Being aware of and knowing how best to work with people is your job. But you don't have to know everything there is to know about psychosocial disability. But you should make it your business to know everything that you possibly can learn about the person with the psychosocial disability outside just that label. So a person-led approach, it's about supporting somebody to lead their own care. A person first, leading their own care. A person-led approach requires strengths-based underpinnings. By that I mean you're looking at a person from the perspective of, I wonder what skills, attributes, knowledge and capabilities this person has. Not I wonder what their mental health diagnosis is and I better address this psychosocial disability or the behaviour that stems from being unwell. Recovery-oriented, person-led approach. I find myself saying it constantly. I am the expert on my own life. I have many of the answers to the questions that you may have. Ask me, don't go to the textbook. I think the other really interesting thing is when we're working with people with disability, but in this case, of course, we're talking about psychosocial disability, we need to remember that it is a human right for choice, control, autonomy. And it is a human right to make mistakes and learn from our mistakes. Your job is not to cotton wool people just because they're unwell. Because all you do is disempower, and then we perpetuate that cycle of low expectation. And a lot of people with disability are already very, very good at having a very low opinion of themselves. We need to lift people up, not add to that burden of a person not feeling worthy or a person not having a sense of value for themselves. I think I've already spoken to this slide, but you know, I just can't stress enough that people will fluctuate with wellness and unwellness. And you don't have to be the psychologist, you don't have to be the psychiatrist, you don't have to be the expert. Always remember that stay in your lane. If you have concerns about somebody, if you feel somebody is spiralling with unwellness, then go and speak to workplace supervisors. Speak to the person that you're supporting first, but if you continue to have concerns, go and speak to others. Do not step into that role of, I'm going to fix this person. Working as a clinician is something way out of my reach, and I'm sure it's out of the reach of most people sitting here today. We will see particular behaviours of concern displayed at times by people with psychosocial disability. And sometimes it's really difficult to work out what is attributed to the actual disability and what is just human nature. So you've always got to ask yourself, what's going on with a person and what might be impacting a person? We look at physical factors. Somebody may feel sick, unwell. I'm not saying mental health unwellness or psychosocial. I'm saying physically unwell. They may have experienced a loss in their life recently of a pet or a loved one. A person might have had a situation where they didn't have a good day at work, or they didn't do well in an assessment, an exam. That doesn't mean they're unwell. So psychosocial disability is very, very hard to pinpoint at times or to identify at times, because we have all these emotions going on for us on a day-to-day basis, and we're trying to work out, is this attributed to somebody's unwellness or is this just human nature? So always stop and think, what is going on for this person at this time in life? What has happened over the day? What has happened over the week? And what behaviours should I be concerned about? And what behaviours are just normal, average behaviours because of different things going on? I mean, as they say, life happens. When you're trying to understand what's going on for somebody, just ask yourself, what's occurred over the few hours lead up to now? What's happened right now? What's been going on while I've been with this person? Whether you're out shopping with someone, you're in their home, you're helping a person with self-care, whatever it may be. But what's going on right now? Has something changed? Is there something different today that may well trigger a person? Is the environment different? Or is the environment not conducive to this person feeling safe? What are other people doing around us? If you're out and about in society, socially, I'm sure you've been out and about with people with disability where others step away because they see unusual behaviour, or they see something that speaks to, oh my gosh, that person has a disability, or that person might have a mental health condition. Because a lot of the struggle that people can have will be attributed to messages that are being communicated to them on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of the messages experienced when out and about trying to just navigate life, socialise, be at work, buy the groceries, whatever the case may be, a lot of what society projects at people with disability is negative, devaluing, humiliating. And when you experience day after day after day these types of messages, it's cumulative and can significantly impact people's mental health, well-being. So quite often you will find that triggers for people are not a one event. It may be one thing that's finally tipped somebody over the edge. But what's the bigger picture here? What's been going on for this person for the last 2 weeks, week, yesterday, today? And you will often find that it's something peripheral that's impacting them. And once again, believe people's reality. Because I think the really, really difficult thing when we're trying to understand mental illness and the stories people will tell us is it's very unrelatable if you're not living similar. So I can have conversation with people with other disability types, and can relate, and I can certainly relate to what it's like to live a life where you're often humiliated, abused, sent messages of devalue. So I can connect with people even if their disability type is different to mine or their label is different to mine. But when you're not living in that space yourself, it can be very, very difficult to truly believe the experiences of people with disability, essentially the experiences of people who have mental health conditions. We are, a society, very, very intolerant of people with mental health conditions. Sometimes you will come across behaviour, I do not like the language, challenging behaviour, because as we heard earlier today, all behaviour is a means by which somebody is trying to communicate. People aren't naughty, people aren't bad, people don't decide to act out just because. Behaviour is communication. It's trying to work out what somebody is trying to communicate to you. That is one of the hardest tasks that you will face in your support worker journey. So sometimes behaviours might be saying to others, I don't feel heard. Will you listen to me? I've been saying this over and over again and I don't feel that anyone is hearing me, and my behaviour will escalate because I'm getting frustrated. Just as any other person would get frustrated. You don't need to have a psychosocial disability to get frustrated. Unwanted attention. If somebody has quirky, eccentric behaviours, they're having a bad day. They're acting out when they're in public. Or they have a very visible disability. We part crowds. People are so shocked when they're looking at difference and so uncomfortable with it that we can often misread people's behaviours as threatening because it's not socially acceptable. But at the end of the day, a lot of people with psychosocial disability may be acting out because they're seeing the body language and behaviours of others around them. And that's very impactful. Could be something's wrong, somebody's unwell. We just had a wonderful delivery from Melissa talking about the difference between, what was that? The difference between dementia and, thank you, yeah. And it could just be nothing to do with a person's mental health diagnosis, but everything to do with someone's physically unwell. And we also live in a world where there's so much going on sensory-wise. And society's starting to better understand sensory sensitivity. And I'm sure you've probably come across situations where you've been with people who show sensory sensitivity, yet behaviour that is displayed because somebody is experiencing sensory overload is often misread. Challenging behaviours. Is it? Or is it just a reaction to and a communication? I'm so uncomfortable here. I don't know what to do. You've got to get me out of this environment. So the main thing is when you see unusual behaviours or behaviours that, you know, others will describe as challenging behaviours, just stop and ask yourself, what's going on for this person and what are they trying to communicate? Not, gee, they're a bad person or they're misbehaving and something needs to be done about this. I think I've covered that slide quite well, so I'll move on to the next one. These are quotes from people who live with psychosocial disability. You know, and sometimes we get so wrapped up in being very complex in regard to how we should go about our work and how we should be supporting people and what we should be doing. And you look at the simplicity of what these two people have communicated in so much as supporting them well. Have a conversation with the person. Not rocket science, is it? Have them help you identify what it is they need, what their requirements are, what they want you to support them to do or achieve. Work collaboratively. Respect, respect, respect. At least equal sharing of power, nothing less. Just because somebody has a mental health condition or is experiencing psychosocial disability doesn't mean that their human right for independence, autonomy, choice and control should be watered down. If a person's human rights are watered down, for example, a person is scheduled, that's a decision by those trained to make that level of decision. That's a decision where we are removing somebody's human rights by scheduling them. We need to make sure that this is well thought through and a very, very formal protocol process is followed. We need to stay in our lane. If we are not highly trained in that area, then we do not remove power from people. We do not remove choice control. We do not take over just because we think that's what we should do because somebody has a mental illness, they're experiencing unwellness, so I now need to take the lead and run their life for them. No. You need to focus on the person, not on the disability, the entirety of the human. I will just stop and address this. When you feel intimidated, threatened, you feel unsafe, you feel that somebody might be escalating, or they are showing anger, and that might be escalating. What should you do? Not rocket science, is it? Stay calm. Very easy to say, not that easy to do when you can find yourself in a situation where you might feel unsafe or unsure. But you should always have tools in your toolbox. What methods do I have to help me stay calm in difficult situations? What will I choose to do if I ever find myself in a difficult situation? Be pre-prepared. Think about that now, so when you step into situations that may become difficult, you've already thought through how best to manage yourself. I meet a lot of people who talk about those people's behaviours. Let's blame it on those people. Their behaviour this, their behaviour that, under the microscope. And you know, I challenge you, I put it to you, what about your behaviour? What are you choosing to do? Have you at all contributed to a situation in a way where it's detrimental, meaning a person is escalating and your approach isn't appropriate, so that then finds the person escalating further? We spend a lot of time scrutinising those with disability, but very, very little time looking within and saying, okay, as a support worker, I'm contributing here. Do I contribute anything at all that is inappropriate or wrong? Have I brought anything to this situation that may not have helped the situation? It's a two-way street. If you're working with somebody who is displaying difficult behaviours or escalating, it's not all about them. It's also about the way in which you approach the person, the way in which you react to that situation. Sometimes we need to look more within than without. De-escalation strategies sounds great on paper, isn't as easy to implement when we're feeling in a flight and fight mode. But I will touch on de-escalation strategies. Listen, 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 listen. Communication is the area where you will find most frustration comes for people with disability, because we don't feel heard, and as you've already learnt today, people will shout from rooftops, do lots of different things, become quite animated if they don't feel heard, if they don't feel understood, if they don't feel validated. So listen, listen, listen. Offer reflective comments. Show that you're truly interested. Show that you're hearing them. Use open body language. Don't interrupt a person. Don't tell them that their truth is not their truth. Don't argue with somebody. Maintain eye contact to a degree where it's reasonable, because by doing that, you're engaged with the person. You're saying, I'm hearing you, I'm respecting you, I'm listening to you, you've got my full attention. Whether you incline your head, whether you have open body language, whatever it is, be very mindful of your body language. The minute you show body language that's closed or might communicate to somebody power, you've tipped the table. You've undone everything that you've probably achieved by showing that you're listening, showing that you care, using affirmation, because your body language does not match what you're saying. What is going on for you needs to be very open, very relaxed, very calm, even if you don't feel like that. Empathy and understanding, not sympathy. And remember, it's not about focusing on the mental health. It's focusing on the entirety of the person. I just said to you a little bit earlier that people with disability experience a lot of abuse, a lot of neglect, a lot of assault, difficulties on a daily basis. So if you go into every engagement with all people with disability, not just those who you have come to learn have a mental illness or live with psychosocial disability, if you go into every single engagement as a support worker with all people with disability, taking the 5 elements of trauma-informed practice, using this as your base every day, you are approaching every single engagement with every person from a perspective of you could not do any better if you tried. Does that make sense? Safety. People need to feel safe when they're with you. What does that look like for each individual person that you engage with? That's something you need to come to learn through your engagement with them. Choice, control, empowerment. I escalate and get pretty ugly when I feel that people are removing my choice, my autonomy, my right to run my life the way I choose to. Collaboration. That was explored a little bit earlier today. Working with, sharing, walking beside, not taking over. Trustworthiness. Trustworthiness is interesting. You know, how do we build trust? What do you need to feel trust when you're with somebody? You know, at the end of the day, people with disability have more in common with you than not. So when you're thinking about trustworthiness, it's not, how do I build trustworthiness with a person with disability, or how do I build trustworthiness with a person with psychosocial disability? But how do we do that on a daily basis in all our interactions? They're the same skills. It's the same knowledge that you should be taking into relationships with those with mental illness or psychosocial disability. It's not rocket science. I've already talked about listening, language. I've woven that through. However, I just really want to highlight the language we use, the words we choose. Can be very damaging or can be very uplifting. Sometimes we don't always get it right, and that's okay. It's what you choose to do when you make a mistake that most matters, the conversations. But there's 3 language guides there that you might find of great use when working with people, not just with mental illness, but with disability. Ask a person if you're unsure what language is appropriate, how to address somebody. Ask them. By asking a person what you're saying is, I'm interested, I want to learn, I respect you, I want to hear from you. And that's something that doesn't always happen for people with disability. We can often be the last person who is asked, or overlooked completely and never asked. So don't assume the journey of people with disability. Try to learn, understand our journeys in life, but don't assume you know. Make sure that whenever decisions are being made about individuals with disability, that they're at the table, that they have equal power, if not more power. Disability land is really interesting because we spend a lot of time educating people, which is totally okay. But also look to find ways that you can source information without it just coming from those with disability. What can you do to increase your learning and your knowledge in the mental health space, the psychosocial space? I've already covered the listening and the learning. Leaning into discomfort. Humans are a funny race. We like to shy away from what makes us uncomfortable, and we like to only embrace the knowledge that we have as our truth. When I say lean into discomfort, it's that fear factor. What you don't understand, you will fear. The more you learn about something, the less you fear, the more comfortable you become. And I really, really encourage that approach in the mental health arena especially, because it's so misunderstood. And also be prepared to throw out some of the ideals that you may already carry about mental illness and psychosocial disability. To make room for information that is actually true and correct. We carry a lot of disinformation as our unconscious bias in the backs of our heads because of what we've learned over the years about those sort of people, people with mental illness. And to be brutally honest, most of what we think we know is actually not true and correct. So make room to learn through sourcing credible current information. I'm going to stop there, and I think we're going to do a little bit of question answers, or have I run over time?
I think we're just running out of time, because there is lunch and we have to be out at a certain time as well. So please join me in thanking Janel as well today. It's been an incredible presentation, and we really appreciate your insights, both your personal insights and also all the information that you shared with us to continue learning and developing. So again, thank you very much. We very much appreciate it.